This is the Citrus Experience podcast, brought to you by Citrus Men. We're passionate about growing premium grafted citrus trees and helping you on your growing journey. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or an emerging green thumb, this series is for you. We share expert advice, insider knowledge and practical tips you can apply because we know and grow citrus.
Hello and welcome to the Citrus Men podcast. I'm Susan Burns.
And I'm Gary Isles.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing citrus tree roots and why we graft our trees and why buying grafted citrus is the only option if you want success. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Susan. What an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, isn't it? Because we have a lot of people very curious about understocks or rootstocks. So I suppose if we start by just saying like a grafting or budding, a scion, and a scion is a shoot or a bud. And when we put that to a rootstock, it's almost magical. It's certainly a very revered and specialised skill, and the union creates the beginning of a premium citrus. And that graft in my plants has given the citrus tree extra super special powers of protection, don't you think, Gary?
Absolutely. So it gives you the opportunity to take the best of both plants. So we're using the scion or the top, the variety that we want. So we've selected that, and then what's the best root system to have under that, and that's when we choose the rootstock, and it gives great strength. And the rootstock affects all sorts of things in the plant. So it's not just the roots; it does bring with it some disease resistance, and brings with us a whole raft of things that are beneficial to the final plant.
Yeah, it certainly gives them a superpower, I think. So let's start right at the beginning. Have we always used rootstock? We know that the in Australia, certainly, the trees came over on the first fleet, but were they grafted?
It's difficult to find that out looking at the history. I suspect that they would have been grafted. They picked up at Tenerife on the way over. I think they got most of the ones. I'd imagine that they would have been on some sort of a rootstock in those days, even then. So I presume that most of the plants that we've had in Australia over the history since settlement have been on a rootstock of some description.
Mm-hmm. So, and again, I suppose like our citrus trees, they've developed and got better, and we've got better at selecting out varieties as part of the evolution of growing and producing citrus trees. But what have we always used predominantly in Australia as understock, Gary, through the history of Australia?
Well, I think if you go back in history, then we used a lot of lemon type, rough lemon rootstocks. So even when I first started, there was still a lot of rough lemon rootstocks used. There would have been some sweet orange rootstocks used. They were more easily available. But as time's gone on and research has developed, we've now got a much better range of rootstocks to use. They're targeted at conditions in each country, and researchers have spent their life working on rootstocks. It's a very specialised area, but in the end, those of us at the end of the chain have got a great range of rootstocks to pick from to give the best results for the plants. And this just a quick note into the future. There's a lot of work being done for rootstocks right now to give disease resistance against some of the exotic diseases. Fortunately, most of them we don't have here, and that's back to our biosecurity talk. But there's a lot of research being done to give resistance to some of the diseases that are causing issues around the world. And a quick note is that some of these research programs are using the genetics from some of our native citrus, some of our native limes. They they feel may help in this world. So in their genetic mix, when they're doing their cross pollinations and everything, they're using some genetics from the native Australian citrus, and it'll be interesting to see in the next few years whether that works or not. But it's nice to know that we're part of the mix in what's happening around the world.
Yes, it's extraordinary, the research and development that's going on, and it, most people don't even think about it or know about it. I mean, it's not something people probably concern themselves with daily, but I know that you're very involved in the International Society of Citrus Nurserymen, and I suppose when you're all together and sharing your knowledge, you all know what's going on, and it's certainly very exciting. Lots of exciting things that happen in the citrus world.
Absolutely. It excites us anyway. So
yes, I know. I know. I don't know whether that's sad or wonderful, but I think it's wonderful. So tell us then, so predominantly, say, way back when, people were using maybe the rough lemon, and what was that, what sort of benefits did that and do rootstocks sort of generally, as a broad brush explanation, what do they give to a tree, Gary?
Well, I'll just do the rough lemon first. There's a few advantages with using a rough lemon rootstock. It was very vigorous, so it would give you a strong, a bigger tree than what you would get on other rootstocks, which in some type sometimes is an advantage and sometimes not. It was very compatible with most of the varieties. So sometimes with a rootstock and a sign, there is an incompatibility, and so they just don't work well from the graft. The graft will survive, but the tree won't do well. So there's a bit of matching going on, and rough lemon was quite easy to match. It would work with most things, and it was vigorous. But there was some downsides. So in times when it was really wet, it didn't like its roots being in a lot of wet ground, and roots would die off, and things like that were forced people to look at other options, and that's when the research really began, and then we've got this raft of rootstocks that we can use now, and they're very targeted, but they're also they're targeted for areas and for different varieties, but they can be used generally as well. So we use a lot of the trifoliate types. That's what we call in Australia trifoliata, and then there's a range of citrange, which is crosses that were done mainly in the States, and of course we use a lot of flying dragon in our dwarf range of citrus. Mm-hmm. And that's a dwarfing rootstock.
Yes,
and we've got some Australian bred rootstocks as well, Cox and Cox hybrid and Benton citrange. So that Benton's definitely used in other parts around the world, and they're very good rootstocks under lemon. So you can target your rootstock to your sign to get the best result.
Sure, and I think a point that we need to make here is that. You are the specialist, and all the research and development that's going on. You are putting, at Citrus Men, you are putting the best variety understock with the best, with the selection that it's kind of suited to. And with a lot of people having great interest in rootstock and knowing what their traits are and what their abilities are, we sort of get a lot of questions like it's a mix and match kind of option, like they're mag wheels that you can put on a car. You're going to get from the Citrus Men the best selection for the tree that you've chosen. Would that be accurate, Gary?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we look at what rootstock works best under various signs or varieties. So just take Eureka Lemon. Eureka Lemon is incompatible with some of the citranges and some of the trifoliata types. So it's we look at that and we use two rootstocks now. The Benton and Cox hybrid that I mentioned, we use those under Eureka, where in the past you would have got, normally you had rough lemon because it was compatible, gave you a big tree, but the roots didn't have the resilience that some of these more modern and targeted rootstocks have. So yeah, we make that choice. We don't use rough lemon anymore because we think there's too much in the down. So I gave you a great big tree.
Yes.
But sometimes, that's not what people need. You don't want a tree that's 4 or 5 meters high. You want a tree that's manageable, and gives you good fruit. So one of the things the rootstock does, it affects the quality of the fruit.
Yes.
So using that example, rough lemon under Eureka lemon will give you a big lemon, will give you a big thick skin, quite rough. Where if you're using some of these other rootstocks, you don't get that big rough skin lemon. You get a little, much more manageable fruit, and so they affect the fruit quality as well as disease resistance and all sorts of cold tolerance, all those things. So yeah, it is quite a it's a big field, rootstocks, and like I said earlier, people spend their lives working on rootstocks.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Interesting when you're at a dinner party, I suppose. What do you do? But research rootstocks. Weird. But let's just go back to the rough lemon. Because I wanted to sort of talk about, again, like when you go into a nursery to buy a plant, don't be fooled. We discussed it in the last episode. The size isn't everything. And as you're saying, if you buy a tree that's being grafted onto rough lemon, it looks like, wow, that's value for money. Look at that enormous tree. But as you say, you're not going to get a premium growing tree, and the fruit's going to be more that thicker skin, in particular if it's a lemon. So, yeah, go for quality every time. So aside from giving it vigor and protecting it from the cold, you touched on the fruit a little bit there, Gary, but it's also would be fair to say it's giving us true to type when we graft, just generally. It gives us true to type fruit. Can you pick that apart a little bit for people when we say true to type?
Well, true to type. So we go to a lot of trouble picking, making sure that whatever we graft or bud onto these rootstocks is from the plants that are what they're supposed to be. So we, as we explained in an earlier podcast, that we get our material out of the old citrus program, which is tested so that it's true to type, to make sure that it is a Washington navel orange, that it hasn't been it's not coming off a tree that's a sport or that's been. So we know it's been tested, and that's what we're getting. So we're true to type. Now with the rootstocks, they're grown from seed, and all the same deal, same thing. With the trees that the seed is coming off, they're in that old citrus program. They've been tested. We know that they are have the correct genes that are going to give you the disease resistance, the compatibility, and all those things. So we know what we're working with.
It's so sad when you hear people say, I've had this tree for years and it's never produced any fruit. I got it from a cutting from an auntie. Well, this is why. Because grafting, not only does it give you, as we say, true to type, you may never even get a fruit, correct? Especially if you're growing citrus from seed. Bit of a trend that we've noticed on social media, perhaps, how to grow a citrus from seed. Well, don't. That's not your job. Your job is to buy it from Citrus Man and get something fabulous and be on your way, because it could take you how long? You could wait 10 years and you've got this tree and then it produces some funny little fruit. Taking this.
Well, no, we don't want to encourage people to grow from seed, because it's a long-term process. So from seed, you'll often get a tree, we say it's juvenile, which means it'll have big thorns. It might take 5, 6, 7, 8 years to fruit, depending on the seedling. So, it's not and the other thing is that it may not be true to type, like we were saying before. From seed, then the citrus signs often don't come true from seed. So that's just a false economy, and you don't know what you're going to get when you grow from seed. And from cuttings, well, we use a rootstocks for we don't go to all this trouble just for the fun of it. Grafting, budding is a craft, and people have to be trained, and
yes,
it's quite a skill. So we don't do that just for the fun of it. We do it because it creates a much better plant. So you're getting a good root system, a strong root system suited to the variety, and for Australia. I might just mention that in this world of Google searching, and there are a number of rootstocks that people will ask us about that they've Google searched up that work in countries overseas, but they don't work here. So there's certain plant pathogens within the citrus world that Australia has. Fortunately, we don't have the real sinister ones, but we do have some, and some rootstocks are affected by those plant pathogens. So we need to use rootstocks that work here, some rootstocks that work well in overseas countries that don't have that mix of their plant pathogen mix is different to ours.
Yes.
And so we have some rootstocks that just don't work because of that. So don't think that we're not looking and using everything that we can. We use the best tools we've got, and some of those things we can't use. So it's just a little side note.
Yeah, look, it's important, Gary, because look, people can buy plant material online, and we have talked about it before, but please don't ever bring in a rootstock or any plant material, full stop, just don't do it. But as she touched on, it could be full of pathogens, and also some of those are not resistant to endemic diseases that are here in Australia. So might work really well in another country, but it's not going to work in Australia.
Yeah, yes. Please refer to our biosecurity podcast and think of the consequences. And it's a worry because of the way the world is now, with things moving around, much easier than what they have in the past.
And you're not doing anyway.
Yeah, please don't buy plant material from overseas. It's fraught with danger for all of us in the plant world, not only citrus, right across the whole plant world. There's things that we're so fortunate here to live on an island and be a little bit removed, but everything's got closer with the way things are in a modern age. But please don't bring in plant material from overseas. There are methods through quarantine. You can do it through the right channels, and it's checked. And so there's a whole range of checks and balances. Might take time, but it's well worth it. So but just don't order stuff online and bring it in. It's fraught with danger.
Yes. So look, we are actively encouraging you just to stick to your knitting in a way. Like if you want to experiment with what's available to you here. But certainly always buy a premium grafted citrus tree. I do notice there's a lot of what we know as cutting grown trees. So they're citrus trees that are for sale, which are widely sold. Again, we're not encouraging you to do that. And apart from the fact that they look like a shaggy old bush, they're not framed up properly just because of the way they've grown. What are your thoughts about the cutting grown? No, of course, I know what you're going to say.
Oh, well, anybody that knows me knows my it's about cutting grown citrus. I just think it's if people are going to put a tree in their courtyard, their balcony, their backyard, well, why not pick the best available? Like I've been saying in this podcast, we use a rootstock for a reason. It gives you a stronger root system. A cutting grown citrus will grow, it will survive, and in ideal conditions, then it'll bat on. But once you've got any disease pressure, climate Well, I'm mainly thinking about water, if it's excess water and sitting, the roots of a cutting grown citrus are nowhere near as resilient as the roots of a rootstock. So that's, that's in a nutshell why we go to all this trouble of growing. We're growing two plants to give you one. We're growing a rootstock, and then we're grafting or budding onto that, and then growing another plant. So you're getting, in the process, you're getting two plants put into one, and like I said, we don't do it just for the fun of it. We do it because it creates the premium product that we want to supply to the home gardener.
You're underplaying a point there, Gary, because it's also about the skill set. It's not that hard to take a cutting, but by jingoes, try and do some grafting, try and do some budding. Yes, see why Gary doesn't have any hair. It's a skill on its own, isn't it? It's just, so yes, there's a lot of, a lot's gone into a grafted tree. So please, and it's, we've progressed in the industry so far. It seems so retrograde to me to be selling professionally grown cutting citrus. It's just an anathema to me. However, let's not linger on that point, Gary. How would we know? What are we looking for when we're buying a citrus tree in a garden centre or a nursery? How do we know if it's grafted?
Well, generally you'll see that there's a note on the label. On the back of the label, there'll be a note to say what the rootstock is, whether it's a flying dragon, whether it's a trifoliata, whether it's one of the citranges, Troya or Carrizo citrange, Cox hybrid, all those. It'll be written on the back of the label to say what the rootstock is. And also you can have a look. You can see where the plant's been grafted. So in let's just put the dwarf to the side for a minute. In a normal citrus, you'll see 6 or 8 inches above the, or maybe I should convert to metric. Let's say 150 millimeters above the potting mix. Then you'll see where the graft. You can actually see the difference in the bark, and there'll sometimes be a little kink where that's grown. So you can visually see it. In the dwarf, often they're budded or grafted a little bit lower because we're trying to give you a lower, bushier plant. But you still can have a look and you'll see where the graft, and there's often a little circumference difference between the two that you'll see. But look at the label, have a look at the plant. You can generally get a pretty good idea of seeing where that graft is.
Yeah. I think another important point we need to make here, Gary, is that we don't plant that graft down. Sometimes people want to say, do I bury the graft? Why do they say that?
I don't know, but it's just perceptions, I suppose. But no, keep the graft above the ground. Plant the plant at the same level it is in the pot.
Yes.
So that the graft will be above, and that gives you that you're using that rootstock for protection, and you want it above the soil level, away from those soil-borne pathogens.
And you will. It's lovely when your tree is growing, you'll see it's quite distinctively different. It's a different colour and shape as it gets thicker and bigger, and it's the way it's grown in there. I love looking at my grafts. But you've got to be careful too that they don't shoot away. Sometimes they will, especially in the early days, won't they? The understock can get a little bit too excited and want to make an appearance.
Yes. Well, we do a lot of that in our production, is in keeping those rootstock shoots off. They will grow, particularly while we've got the plant, but it can happen after the home gardener has it out in their garden. So keep a bit of an eye out. You'll notice that most rootstocks have a trifoliate leaf, which is a leaf with 3 leaflets. So if you see a side shoot coming out from low on the plant and it's got those 3 leaflets and often thorny, then just nip it off, because it is from the rootstock. And if you leave it there, then it is slightly stronger than the plant above the graft, because there's no graft. So if you take it off when it's soft and young, once it's established, then it doesn't happen very often. No. So, but early on, any of those shoots with those sorts of leaves low on the plant, just nip them off.
Yeah. It's sort of like, if you let that develop, it's kind of like the kryptonite. It takes the superpowers away from your tree. So I like to just rub it with my thumb so that it just disappears off. But it's a good thing to keep your eye on. So, gee, we've covered a lot about, I mean, we could go on and on and on. And people do get very excited about rootstocks. But I think, in just recapping, they are being constantly developed. The varieties are being chosen to put with the right tree or plant to give you the best results. Different if you're a commercial orchard and you want to have a variety grown on a understock. That's probably different, correct, Gary? It's not you could do that commercially.
Yeah, well, commercial growers will make their decision on a number of fronts, where they are, their soils, what they want to grow, so and sometimes ripening when they want their fruit to ripe. The rootstock can affect that. Yeah.
So that's different levels. So for the home gardener, the domestic gardener, just have faith in us, the Citrus Men. You are going to get something fabulous that will perform and do as it says on the box. It's going to do wonderfully well for you. So. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. In this, it was a super interesting episode, and perhaps now you've got a deeper understanding of rootstocks and how they work. So, thanks for sharing your amazing wisdom and knowledge, Gary Isles. It's wonderful. So
that's right.
In the next episode, we're going to be doing a bit of citrus myth busting. Yeah, and there's a few little curious and hilarious things that people like to do and say about citrus, behaviours around citrus. So we're going to debunk a few of those and steer you straight. So tune in next time, and I'll look forward to having a chat with you then, Gary, about what we love the most, citrus. See you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening. For resources and contact details relevant to this episode, please see the show notes. Subscribe to Citrus Experience so you know when the next episode goes live, and follow Citrus Men on social media for more great content.